Hello everybody. If you clicked on this video and you're wondering what my thoughts are becoming a pilot knowing the risks that we take, it's simple. The reality of it is of all the occupations I've worked, flying airplanes is the safest I've ever felt at an occupation. There you go. It's that simple. That opinion I did not develop over, it it's not a fact that I read in a book. It's not something somebody told me. It is more or less something I came up with on my own. I have two stories to back that up. Before I say these stories, understand I am 35 and I started flying when I was 30. That means prior to 30, from little boy to 30 years old, I'd always dreamed of being a pilot like a lot of people. Let's just say when I got out of high school at 18, like a lot of young people, like what do I want to do with my life? I had decided not to fly airplanes. And there were multiple reasons that led to that decision. One of those reasons, big reason, was the risk that pilots take. Planes have crashed or do crash, and I didn't want to be involved in that. I thought it was too risky. So I ignored or suppressed, that desire to be a pilot and just went into the workforce like a lot of people do. And it was good. About in my early 20s, we'll say. So here's the first story. So early 20s, I ended up working in a warehouse. It was a government-related job, and we would store the military's things when we wouldn't use it. So, and I was making good money. It was my first career level job. So money was there, health benefits, retirement, all vacation time, all those things, the usual. Being at that place over the years, I was starting to see kind of safety issues at that building. So it was an old building. Boards would fall from the ceiling, and it was a very big building. So if a board falls from the ceiling and hits somebody, you're going to get killed. There were other things as well. For example, there was a lot of mold in the building. So if one risk of getting hit by the board was one thing, but another thing was the long-term effects of working there as well. Breathing in the mold every day, I felt like it wasn't good for my health. I was constantly sick. I would go home after work and sneeze, and just a tissue would have black stuff on it from breathing in all that stuff. There were other strange instances as well, like it's a large warehouse. Maybe you guys are familiar with this, maybe you're not. But sometimes animals go in the warehouse and make their homes in something. So I once take my hand and put it into a box to get something. It was a large box, and there was a raccoon in there. Turns out that raccoon had rabies. There were other things as well. We weren't necessarily storing things that we were certified to store. Not necessarily like a explosive or something like that. I'm not certified to handle those things, but I was. And quick side note, I know what you're thinking. Safety things like this that put things at jeopardy, that jeopardize things, they don't. Why are they happening here? Because it's a government-related job, and the government made all these rules, they don't necessarily have to enforce them for themselves. If it was a private industry, I'm sure something would go on that where boards can't fall from ceilings, the mold would have been fixed or cleaned or removed, things of that nature. Anyway, long story short, with that job, I didn't feel safe. That's what it was. I didn't feel safe. I still didn't want to be a pilot at that point due to the risks that they take. So after that job, I had moved on to another job, which I really liked. That job was, my responsibilities were to maintain and observe the population of bugs in the county. I really liked it. I thought it was a cool job. And so one day I am parked along the roadside. It's about a 55-mile-an-hour speed limit road, you know, 2 lanes and no guardrail, just for perspective. So I'm parked along the roadside, and I'm out of the truck, walking down to the side of the road. There's a swamp at the side where you check the population of the bugs. So there, as I'm walking to the side of the road to check the population of the bugs, there is a sign. Walk around the sign, go down, check the population of bugs, all good. As I'm walking back up the side of the road, I go back around that sign, and I'm just wondering. I was like, what's the sign? So I look at the sign, and it's a memorial sign, and the person, turns out somebody had gotten hit and killed right where I was standing on the side of the road. So right there in that instant, kind of opened my eyes. Not necessarily opened my eyes to airplane stuff, but just opened my eyes in general. I was like, oh God. I was like, there's risk involved with this job as well. I could get hit by a car standing on the side of the road. And this is not a complaint against the job. I do like the job, but it's just the nature of the job, we'll say. And I didn't realize, or I failed to connect that dot, that this could be a thing. So, and I keep my eyes out on the cars and everything like that. I try and mitigate that risk as best as I could, but something could happen. I could get hit on the side of the road very easily. And this is just one stop. It's an 8-hour day, so there are many stops along many busy roads that I do. Not only that, but I learned about this thing as well. It's called chronic poisoning. That is, so let's say I get hit by a car, that's a quick injury or a quick death. Chronic poisoning is poisoning when it's a low dose over a long duration of time. And this job taught me all about chronic poisoning, and I am not only monitoring the population of bugs, but I'm also treating them with pesticides as well. So you're always trained to avoid the pesticides. You're always warned about pesticides. So that was another somewhat concern or wonder I had long-term working here with the pesticides. 20, 30 years from now, what is me being exposed to pesticides on the low-dose side of things? What's that going to do to me? So I did enjoy that job, and I liked it. It wasn't necessarily for me, and I had kind of a moment, I'll say about a year in. So I asked myself, I was like, what do you want to do? I said, what do you really want to do? And first thought was I want to fly airplanes. So, and then that second thought was, okay, well, if you fly airplanes, what about the risk that pilots take? And I was like, okay, I don't know if I should do it because of the risk. And I was like, hold on a second. You gave yourself 2 opportunities to not fly airplanes and make a living for yourself. 2. The first job, safety was not a priority. The second job, safety, it was a priority. However, there were just inherent risks that go along with that job that I wasn't necessarily comfortable taking. As they say, I just didn't really feel like it was worth it. So I was like, okay, I'm gonna try it. I'm gonna learn how to fly planes. I'm gonna shoot for a commercial license. I'm gonna give it a shot. And if I get into a situation or I get spooked or get scared on something, I'll just back out. So I was like, okay, we'll give it a shot. So, and here's the interesting thing, what I said originally in the video to now, is as I entered flight school, or I'll say the flight school environment, I had realized that safety is pretty much number one from a flight school perspective. So being at flight school opened my eyes, and I really had this thought. I didn't say it out loud, but with my flight instructors, I had this thought. I was like, wow, this is the occupation that I felt the safest at. because, safety is a number one priority. And not only that, but I feel like my employers are prioritizing safety as well. So at that point, I got a lot more comfortable flying airplanes, knowing that my two previous attempts at making a living or a career, there was a lot of risk involved. I felt like there was, interestingly enough, less risk flying airplanes. So I know what it's like to be a new pilot, or to not even be a new pilot, but to make the decision, okay, I'm going to go to flight school. You're watching crash videos, you're analyzing things. You're wondering what you would do in that situation, and you're wondering how you could avoid it or prevent it. I know what that's like to be a pilot with the risk mitigation. And it taught me the reality of this. The thing is when an airplane has an accident, let's say, when this video is coming out, just recently, like about a month ago or like maybe 2 months ago, that UPS MD-11 crash happened. When an airplane crashes, you hear about it. It's in the news. People are talking about it, and you're going to learn this as well if you are an up and coming pilot. People are, your friends, family are going to know you're a pilot, and then when an airplane crashes, you're going to be the guy they're going to go to and be like, "Hey, this airplane crashed." So when airplanes crash, people know. But I'll tell you this: when accidents happen unrelated to aircraft, a lot of the times, not all the time, but a lot, you don't know. When I left that job where boards falling from the ceiling, I don't know if a board fell from the ceiling and hit somebody. That's not going to make the news. Or the person who was hit and killed on the side of the road had a job. That's not going to make the news either. It could make the local news, sure. And I would never wish that on anybody or anything, but there's a lot of things that are, I'll say, more unsafe than flying airplanes that you would never even hear about or you would never even know about. So that's my thoughts.